You want me to run that?
I want to call to order the Children's Trust regular meeting of October 11th, 2021. And first thing to do is to read what I have to read, and I think it's a different one today. So, any member of the public wishing to be heard shall complete a physical or virtual comment card and present it to the clerk of the trust prior to the start of the board meeting. Members of the public recognized by the chair will have 3 minutes to speak on a single subject matter submitted on their comment card presented prior to the start of the meeting. The clerk of the trust will function as the official timekeeper. At a previous meeting, we passed a motion to allow board members to participate virtually so long as we had a quorum physically present due to the extraordinary circumstances of COVID-19. Given that the county's state of emergency has expired, the board would have to find extraordinary circumstances for a board member in order for them to allow them to participate virtually. Otherwise, members may be allowed to participate virtually, but will not be allowed to vote. Are there any extraordinary circumstances, Colin?
What's that?
Any extraordinary circumstances?
That's your comment, John.
Okay, Colin? Okay. All right, clerk will now call the roll.
Member Strickland?
Here.
Member Wilson? Member Cornell?
Here.
Member Hart? Here. Member Lavorda? Here. Member Simon?
Here.
Member Snyder?
Here.
Member Twombly?
Here.
Member Wilson-Wood? Here. Chair Pinkerton?
Here. Now, for the approval of the agenda, any revisions, Colin? Okay, so, if there's any item that someone would like moved from the consent agenda because they want it to be heard, we can move it to the regular agenda. Otherwise, we need to have a motion for the vote for consent and regular agenda.
I had one item 3, I'd like, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, the item 5 on the consent agenda, I had a question about that. If I can just ask now, and we don't have to pull it off, is that okay? Or do you want to pull it off?
Doesn't make a difference.
Go ahead and pull it off, and I'll just ask when we get to it.
Okay.
So move approval of the regular agenda, consent agenda, moving off item 5, the, where do you want to do first?
That'd be fine.
Yeah, first.
Okay.
Second.
Motion second. Do we have any discussion? Do we have any public discussion? Anything from you and the audience? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, first item will be the item that Tina wanted to bring up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask the ED or staff if they could tell us the expenditures at 3,372,000 approximately, and I was trying to follow this through to the grants and aid, the amount that we actually awarded last year, that was truly the $2,065,000, if I read this report correctly. That's where it's only to agencies.
This is the fourth quarter financial report that you have the question on.
Yes, page 33, and actually the detail, I think it is on page 30.
Okay. My page 33 does not, are you using the agenda that we sent you in the mail or the one in your notebook?
The one that you sent me in the mail.
Okay.
So the one is that the one, Tina, that has the item fourth quarter financial report, FY21?
Correct.
Alachua County, and then
Yes.
the breakdown, expenditures of $3 million, blah, 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 receipts 7.9, statement of funds on hand,
Can you just point
9.7.
to it? That'd be helpful.
Yes, someone's in this amount, is that just for the quarter?
That's for the whole year.
Okay, and then I was asking for this report here,
Yes.
this is grant and aid
Yes.
for the year, here, this year-to-date transaction.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Does that work?
that works.
Okay, someone want to make a motion, just to approve?
Yes, move that we, receive staff report.
Second.
Have a motion to second, any discussion? Any public discussion? Any discussion from anyone? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion's unanimous. Okay. Chairman's report, I'd like to remind board members that there's a governance meeting tomorrow consisting of Dr. Lavarda, the esteemed chair, and myself. And we will be meeting at the CTAC office at 802 West Fifth Avenue on the second floor. And y'all are welcome to come. It's a blast.
Absolutely scintillating country.
You did the same meeting I was last time. We will be discussing the general administrative and governance policy at the meeting tomorrow. I'd also like the board to know that we were very well received at the county commission meeting, September 28th. They, received some very good questions and good feedback. It was a pleasant exchange of ideas. So,
What time is the governance meeting?
beg pardon?
Time.
1 o'clock. Okay, do you want to expound upon that? Ken?
I guess the only thing I would say is we've got a very engaged board of county commissioners. They very much are interested in the trust. One of the things that did come up was that there are a number of organizations that receive funding related to a very specific RFP at the trust. Some of those organizations are also receiving funding at the county's CAP program, which is about $1.3 million. And they may also be receiving some money through the city of Gainesville and other grant recipients. And so I know we've talked here about, now that Colin has staffed up, really looking at all the funding across organizations that are being provided to the kids and their families. And so that was something that I just wanted to bring up.
And if it, we talked to Ron, I'm sorry, you said you had 3 other presentations that they said.
Yeah, no, well, this was important, and so, we were overloaded that day, yeah, we went way too late, but I was really happy that we had the time.
Can I just make a comment?
Second.
That's really helpful information, and I'm just wondering if for staff, it changes any gap analysis that we do, because what appears to be a gap in our funding may not be a gap in city and county and our funding when looked at as one.
I think that's something to look at.
Just a quick question, so how is that information assimilated and then conveyed to the trust? Is that you all have a list, or assuming you have records of those particular?
Yeah, I get all the funding. I get the United Way funding,
Okay.
I get the, county funding, there's other funding, we're happy. I look at the ESSA budget that the district presented. The city of Gainesville is trying to figure out what to do with their funding, and there's several line items in there for, yes. So right now it's ad hoc. One of the asks I asked of the county was to consider some kind of coordinating council where we formally meet periodically to discuss whose funding what. But yes, I do pay attention to that. That's consistent. I think I beat that drum before, who pays for what, everyone's doing their part in the system, so.
I would like this board to workshop it, once we have time to gather all the information, once Colin and his team have time to gather it all, so that we can.
I think that would be helpful.
I'm okay with workshopping it. What I don't, want to happen though is there are several different pots of money that come out, that are around, that are available, but they're very limited of pots of money. Like this year, United Way, Community Investment Committee had like less than half of what we awarded in the previous year because of COVID. I think that the workplace donations were down significantly. So although there may be lots of little pots of money, I don't want an agency to be dinged because they say, oh, well, you got money from over here, but it may not be enough because grants, like United Way, every single grant, they had like $2 million of requests. I think they awarded $530,000. So folks submitted what they thought they needed, what they needed to operate their funding, but it was significantly curtailed. But then if we come over here, the trust is saying, oh, well, you got money from United Way, or you got money from CAP. all of those are limited, I mean, every pot of money is limited, but what I'm saying is I don't think an agency should be deemed and denied, a true evaluation from the trust because they got money from someplace else. That's what I know.
Yeah, and to build on that, you know, when the trust was formed, in the statute, it's very specific. It's not to supplant other funding. And so it took a while, but, the county commission and the new county commission understand that we're not reducing funding for children because we now have a trust. There was previous board members that I think might have wanted to do that. I just think it's very important that our executive director is coordinating and understands if we're not funding something like, and we'll get to this later, safety as much as maybe some other areas, that's because other organizations are doing it, or perhaps we need to do that. And so, to Dr. Hart's point, I think it is important that our staff understands where all these fundings are coming from, so that when we workshop it, or whenever we have that discussion, and the public knows that this is being funded either by the Board of County Commissions or by, I don't look at ESSER funding as, that's one-time funding. I don't view that as ongoing funding. There may be some opportunities, but I view that as just money coming into the community one time. So that was the biggest discussion thing that came out of the board. And then Lee and Colin and I kind of went through kind of our process and how we've been staffing up to get our systems in place. And so that was the whole.
And Ken, impressively said, once again, said that the board's action as of, realizing that we had money, wanting it to get out, has had long-term effects, and perhaps negatively, but we want to get the money out as soon as. So, anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
I would add that if we're going to gather that kind of information and try and coordinate, we also need to have some sense of what the overall cost need is, right? So, the county may be able to fund 10% or 20%, and we ought to know what the real cost of the program is so that we can decide, do we want to supplement, not supplant, but supplement what other agencies are able to put in, because some programs may be cobbled together, a little bit of United Way funding, some TAP funding, some trust funding, and I think without a denominator of what's the total cost, it's hard to know how much should or could or.
Okay. No, not, turn it over to the executive director. And then Christie.
Mr. Chair, I think you did a great job with the POCC. Thanks for answering all the questions. It was a nice break. I appreciate it. You did great.
My pleasure. The dazzling with BS.
And just since you've gotten so good at it, in the next month, we're on the agenda in Hawthorne, Waldo, Missouri. And we look forward to, yeah, really we are. And we're getting a nice tour of the Alachua city government and their complex from Mayor Korber. And we're going to meet with someone up in High Springs before we get on their agenda. So I'd like to thank Liz. Liz has come in like a ball on fire, and it's kind of got us moving here. So we'll be busy from now until the end of the year.
Just let me know when.
I also wanted to say I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the Gainesville for All 5-year celebration. Member Certain was like, she had 5 minutes on the video there of her talking. It was great. It's on YouTube, so if you have a chance to go and see that on YouTube and go to 12 minutes and 32 seconds of the tape, she'll be on there for the next 5 minutes, and she kind of gave the whole story up and running for office. So that was really terrific. Well done, well done.
Excellent. I didn't know they were going to put it together like that. That's
It was very well done, so congratulations. And congratulations to Gainesville for All. Sometimes those things like that feel like they plod along, but when they take 5 years back and look at all the things that they've done, it's really, some policies and things really tremendous. So congratulations to them. I'm glad to be invited. Let's see, we're in the process of seeking quotes to get our boardroom in the office outfitted. So the sound works, we've got numerous, suggestions on how to make our sound better. I didn't actually budget for that, but we have plenty of money in reserve. But the goal is by January, shortly thereafter, we have our board meetings in our office with sound, so people can, wherever they are, comfortably hear our meetings, if they wanna come in person or at home, so we're working on it. Programs, I'm not gonna steal any of Christie's thunder, but I did wanna remind you that we do have 4 provider trainings this month, starting Wednesday, so Wednesday, Friday, following Wednesday and Monday, then Wednesday, and then the Monday after that, so 4 this month. And I think there's 45 agencies that have signed up, we'll have to see, I don't know.
That's really good.
Let's see, I'm not sure if 45 will show up, we'll see what happens, but, 45 have said they'd be interested in coming. We also have, in celebration of keeping the lights on after school nationally, for the first time, our county's gonna be taking part in the Lights On After School celebration here on October 28th. That's a Children's Trust event here at the Cade Museum. There'll be a lot of kids, free tickets. There's a flyer in your, on tab, I think it's tab 12. It'll be on our website, social media. Representative Hinson, will be there to make some remarks, and thanks to Commissioner Cornell for, getting a proclamation to declare, October 28th, Lights On After School Day in front of the Board of County Commissioners, I think the Monday right before that, on the 26th, so that should be a lot of fun. Okay. Just some things coming up on future agendas. One is next month we'll have a recommended schedule for meetings in January. The meeting in January is supposed to be an annual meeting, which means it should be more like a workshop. We have plenty to discuss. But other than that, most of the meetings, we're not recommending anything different except the same time, I think the second Monday of the month. So if that's not good, or if you'd like to change, this would be the time, next week would be the time to discuss it, or send me an email and we can put that together. Otherwise, business as usual. We won't have a July meeting, we'll have our 2 September meetings. So
1 meeting a month, right?
1 meeting a month, yes. Again, the programs team will talk about this, but at the next meeting, we'll have a recommendation for the unallocated dollars in our budget, and Christie's gonna go over that. I wanted to introduce you to someone you may not recognize. This is Betty Freese. Betty is with Carr, Riggs and Ingram. They're serving as our accounting firm, and so normally your question number certain, we're gonna let them handle it afterwards, once they get up and running. But we've had some challenges shifting from the clerk's office over to Carr, Riggs and Ingram, really because of the IT situation. And so that was completely unforeseen by us as a clerk. Not to go too far in the weeds, but the issue is that we're a piece of a financial system purchased by the county, kind of like when your kids use your Netflix account, they have their own, but it's still one thing. And so in order to get on that, we need to go through our IT system, which is fine, but they're an outside vendor, so that's caused some hiccups. So probably in January, one of the things we'll discuss is how to completely separate those 2 functions from the county, just because right now we have no control. Everyone's doing the best they can, but we'll have a plan for that in January, because it looks like long-term we just need to separate those. But Betty, would you like to say a few words?
So my name is Betty, as you said, and I've been with Carr, Riggs and Ingram I was with them for about 7 years, just briefly, and then came back, mainly for this project. So our team is excited to get started, even though we've had some IT issues. We're basically taking on everything the clerk did. So once this IT pickups get controlled, we're hoping to be on our way to serving you guys better.
So for January, one of the things that'll be on there is they'll just give a brief overview of how to read our financial statements and the different reports that we're required to do. We haven't done that yet, so that'll be part of some of the things we'll cover in January. They'll also be taking a look at our finance and budgeting and some other policies in the governance committee. So they'll get right on and get to work right away. Lastly, one other thing that's, have started before we meet again is, the Business Leadership Institute for Early Learning. That will kick off on the 4th and 5th. I get the dates, but I think on the 13th, there's a flyer. Is it in the flyer or is it somewhere? Well, it's in your, yes, it's tab 13. There's gonna be a kickoff and recruitment dinner for, agencies, for childcare centers and family childcare homes that are actually participating. Not at the Cade Museum. I believe we have an alternate flyer to pass out, is that right? Got it. Okay, yeah, so it's at the Sweetwater Inn, which is a nice bed and breakfast on East University, if I'm not mistaken. And, then there will be a community conversation at the Chamber of Commerce, we're partnering with the Chamber of Commerce. That'll be following day, 11:30. So we have a lot going on, we're ready to roll, and,
Okay, well, the star of today's program will be Chrissy, you want us to follow up the handout that you gave us?
Yes, and I'll be clicking through the slides as well, if you guys don't want to do that. Just let me know if you can't hear me, I'll try to speak louder. All right, so I'm really excited to be able to present the summer information for pretty much one of our first RFPs for CPAC. So we're excited about not only the response we got from the community, but to see the feedback we received from families about how their children enjoyed the program. So we're excited to share this information. During the presentation, I'll provide information on a recap of the actual RFP that we released. I'll share program outcomes, participant demographics, additional parent satisfaction information, the feedback, as well as what we learned and the recommendations that came from our providers. I also wanted to note that the pictures that you see are all from our summer camp. So we have an excellent group of photos that we'll be able to share for these purposes, but also other flyers and information that the trust puts out. As a reminder, the trust did use the Summer Learning Conceptual Framework as a guide to assist us in building a thriving summer ecosystem. It also assisted us in finalizing the language for the RFP. Our intent was to fund qualified summer camp providers, award full and partial scholarships to children K through 12th grade residing in Alachua County. The contracts were service, and programs were able to serve more than one site through these summer contracts. Applicants had the flexibility to implement creative and innovative programming by selecting at least one of the following activities during the summer: academic, enrichment, exploratory, and then physical health, play, and recreation. Many of the providers chose more than one of those activities, but through our RFPs, with it being our first year getting that information back from the frame, we were able to, the language that we used in the RFP was that they selected one, but again, many of them did select more than one for their activities. In the contract, each provider had performed, and we looked at how much, we looked at how well, and we also looked at if anyone was better off. So under how much, we looked at how many children were enrolled and the number of days for that program. We also looked at the weekly attendance, so the percentage of CPAC-funded kids if they met the required number of days. And so what we did was we provided you all with snapshots for each program. And so, if a child attended at least one day a week, that is the information we use to determine if they met that performance measure. For if anyone is better off, 80% of the children needed to enjoy camp activities. 75% of the parents need to be satisfied with registration, and I'm still on the same slide here, guys. We wanted to make sure 90% of the parents felt their children were safe at that camp. 80% of the parents satisfied with camp communication, and then 85% of the families enjoyed the overall camp experience. Those were the targets. So in everybody's contract, that is what we expected them to meet. In your snapshot for each program, it'll show you whether that program met those expectations or not. The trust serves 1,125 children living in Alachua County. This slide also gives you a snapshot of those programs that we funded. Participant demographics, the majority of the children were Black or African American at 62%, followed by white at 24%. The majority of the children were between the ages of 5 and 11 years old at 69%, and then at 22% we had children between the ages of 12 and 14. 41% of the children that were eligible for PTAC funding were children from households below 200% of the 2020 federal poverty threshold. This slide here gives you a glimpse into the zip codes where families resided in Alachua County. As you can see, most of the children were in the Gainesville area, and then we had High Springs following that, and then the city of Alachua. And then this slide shows you again the number for Gainesville, High Springs, Alachua. We also had children from Newberry, Waldo, Missouri, Arthur, and Harper. There were 22 programs funded, again, 1,125 children. The actual amount spent total for all 22 programs was $685,986.95. The programs did spend significantly less than what was proposed. That was based on a few different categories. The scholarship, meaning the number of children that actually enrolled. And again, for a provider to be paid for that child, the child needed to be present at least one day for each week for that provider to receive that funding. We also had a category of transportation, which that was significantly less. We had a great partnership with the school district who provided transportation to many of the field trips. There was a category for funding for material as well as support for fuel or rental for trips if that was needed also. This slide also gives you a glimpse into each provider and the cost of their weekly scholarship, the minimum number of weeks that were attended, the average, and then the max for each provider. As you can see from this slide, families were extremely satisfied with the programs that were funded through the Children's Trust. Earlier, when I mentioned the target population, these are the overall performance measures, between 97 and 99% for camper enjoyment, registration process, camp activities, camp safety, camp communication, which was based on how well the camp communicated with the family regarding activities, field trips, so on and so forth, and then the overall experience for that child at the camp. These were collected through surveys that the providers administered to the families that enrolled their children at their camp. So some feedback that we received from families through the survey, that their children loved, learning and experiencing new things, the STEM activities and the field trips, of course, they love, the college tours and the ability to learn and more information, and being, involved with peers in a safe and fun learning environment. What didn't they like? So, they didn't want to leave. That's a great thing, right? So they didn't want to leave, they didn't think camps were long enough. They would have preferred different food options, Chick-fil-A, right? Everybody loves Chick-fil-A. So different food options, but again, what we know for sure is that, especially for families who have food insecurities, that partnership with the school district, met that need significantly. So we were thrilled to be able to offer those food for, those families through the camp. And then they did not like having to wake up early, so some interesting feedback about it. We also, during the feedback process for our providers, gave them an opportunity to not only share pictures, but to be able to share success stories as well. And so we have a success story here from Girls Place, where they had a kid who had a tough, exterior, and she used, that tough exterior to sway other girls away from, the counselor at that camp location. But by the time camp ended, at Girls Place, the counselor had worked really hard, to build a relationship with that young lady, and that young lady became a leader in her group. And, really enjoyed the experience that she had at Girls Place, and really wanted to share that information through a success story. Another success story that we received from, Camp Just for Us, what we loved about this camp is it was, located within Lewis Place community. And there were families there who did not have transportation and did not have a safe place for their children to be, and they did not want to just leave them home. And so having this camp on the property, within that development, allowed those families, to enroll their children in camp and not worry about transportation, not worry about safety for the children. Additional feedback, we asked our providers to indicate how satisfied they were with the notice of funding, contracting process, available training, invoicing process, support from their contract manager, as well as the data collection process. Which you can see from here, sorry about that. Yep.
Can you elaborate on the actual process that was in place at the time?
The process for which one? Do you want me to go through each one?
Not for each one. Is there a way to just kind of sum up the process and how that may differ from any other process that we've implemented?
So, with the notice of funding, summer went out a little earlier.
Right.
We all know that. It went out a little earlier. We provided a bidders conference similar to what we recently did for after school. I think that the feedback I got, I started the contract negotiation calls at summer camp, and I think that they felt like we have a person we can call now. We have an individual, Dion had just started, and his second day, he was on contract calls with me. But I think they were happy to actually have someone that called them, interested in their program, the site visits, going on, the campuses of these different camps and being able to, provide them with information in the contract. This is what this means. This is how you invoice. If you don't understand the data system, which was not easy for many of our organizations, entering their data on a weekly basis and it being connected to their funding could be a little stressful. So being able to walk them through the steps, being able to have access to the system as they saw it so that we can explain it, I think that helped. I think it helped a lot. One thing we also implemented was data and invoice actual training. So before each invoice was submitted to the trust, we opened up, a Zoom meeting and allowed them to call in. What issues are you having? Do you understand why your invoice is calculating the way it is? Do you understand why, you may not get any funding this, invoice because of the advance payments and whether we treat it up or not? So I think the system we have in place works really well, even down to providing additional assistance from organizations like DCF. I think that process helps. I think the transparency of it all, come here, let's learn, let's discuss what it is we're asking for so that they have an opportunity to ask those difficult questions.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Additional feedback that we received from the providers, CTAC funding allowed them to offer scholarships to kids who otherwise would not be able to participate. CTAC staff were very approachable and answered all the questions, allowing them to feel confident. And they were challenged to do something new and exciting for the community that had not been done before. The challenges that they faced, food service, since it was not covered by reimbursement, no show and enrollment, so that was something different that was a challenge for them this summer. Children that may have enrolled but did not come on a weekly basis, and, they didn't show up. Recruitment and registration, that's one of the things that we are working on now. We are already working on our summer and our after-school RFP. Summer starting in June, and then next school year, August 2022. So to approach those issues starting extremely early, so that when they are putting information out, we're not coming in and saying, oh, can you capture this, do it, and then we will already have approached them with that information. Communicating program expectations to parents, that was a challenge for them. Some of our families needed additional support and assistance with being able to provide all the information on an enrollment form. So providing that extra support to the program to be able to capture that information, and then the impact of COVID-19. Additional feedback, support connections for food, partnerships to help providers better provide healthy snacks and meals. Trust is looking into continued partnerships, with food and nutrition, not only for summer, but supporting after-school programs as well. Start the application process, which I just mentioned that I just mentioned as well. And then provide more advanced training, including fiscal management and upfront assistance and support, especially for smaller organizations. Our development collaborative, capacity building collaborative approach, it will cover all those things. Training to support those providers. We've even discussed increasing advanced payments and explaining our contracts and what a reimbursement contract is and what that means for our providers so that they understand that. But that youth development, capacity building collaborative really will target that improvement from providers.
I have a question. I saw food on here twice, that children didn't like it. And so I think as a board, I would like for us to consider lifting that restriction on programs being able to provide food with their grant funding. I visited 3 camps this summer, and Day Springs, the children said they did not like the food service food. And so while school lunch, that program, Ms. Eunice does a remarkable job. She's done a remarkable job of making our whole county, doing the paperwork so that we can eat, all children eat free. And they provide meals and snacks on the weekend. But it is not the healthiest food, in my opinion. There's a lot of sugar. I see a lot of waste. I saw a lot when I went to summer, and when I visit the schools now, the kids throw it away. So I don't think we're that cash strapped, and yes, it is an option, and it does provide food for families that are food insecure. but let's let children in poverty not always have to just get the bottom of the barrel. And I don't, for me personally, I'm not saying we just let somebody spend thousands of dollars on food, but I think the programs being able to, within reason, we set some kind of limit in the board that we'd be able to do that. And, allow the providers to be able to do that. But I'm talking from my own experience. I went and, the reason I went to Day Springs, the day I went, they had been doing some baking and fractions, and so because that's why I went over. And we're talking with the students, and I probably, if not all of them, 95% of them mentioned the food awful, because I asked them what they like about school, and they said the lunch is here, and they, you know, but, so I think that is something that, that as a board, I would like for us to consider in revising our policies, that providers, if they have that in there, not just for their students, if there are organizations who will be doing parental engagement and things of that nature, that they be allowed to provide food for families, if they have meetings during the dinner hour or during lunch hour. I mean, even our Title I grants allow a certain percentage of funding to be spent on food for parent engagement, you know, when they're doing some kind of outreach like that, so. But that's my only thing. But I do think that the summer programming was very well received by the community, and agencies will just need the capacity to be able to meet some of the requirements. But I just think some of the things that's very stringent, and that food one I think is one we can loosen up.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So are you saying the food that the school district provided was not acceptable? I mean, because I need to know this information, if you feel that we need to.
It's not, the children don't, they didn't. And I mean, it's a good service, the cheese and when they have fresh fruits and vegetables that they're given, but the children did not, at Day Springs and at Motion and at, the Kids Count kids as well, they complain about. Even at our schools, when we go there, the kids don't, a lot of waste.
Are there expectations of McDonald's? Because we don't.
No, I'm not saying it's McDonald's, please, don't misinterpret what I'm saying.
Well, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
So I didn't see a whole menu. The day that I went, the children said the food is not hot food, it's a lot of cold food. The day I was there, I saw cereal bars. I got there at the end of lunch, and the teacher was upset that the children was on. They drank the juices, they ate the cheese sticks, and if they had fruit slices, they would eat that. But the sandwich, she was like, the pizza's cold when they bought that. The chicken nuggets are just processed meat. I mean, so I'm not saying we go to McDonald's and get them food or whatever, but I just think that school lunches now is different from what I was accustomed to. And even in the summer when they provided food, normally it was a cold cut sandwich or cheese and like bologna or ham or something of that nature. Every now and then it'd be peanut butter or whatever. That's what I was familiar with. I don't know if that's still on the menu now, but the days that I was there.
Kids like that, you're saying? They like bologna and?
I don't know what they like. I said, that's what I was used to when I was younger. I don't know what they're serving now, but these children, this particular day that I went to Day Springs, they had the chicken nuggets and they didn't like that, so.
Yeah, I agree with Member Certain. The board never passed a policy that said you can't do food. What we wanted to try to do was encourage everybody to take care of the food we had. But what I would recommend is to address some of the concerns that Member Certain brought up. Is we had a food policy. We restricted it to a certain percentage and said you had to follow nutrition guidelines laid out by, I think it was USDA. So we'd be happy to come back. This is part of our thing we're doing with the governance committee, and come back with something where we could pay for food, but it was nutritious. However, I will say, I used to run the Break Spot program that the city did in Jacksonville, and we used to require that people use it because it also impacts how much the Break Spot agency, in this case be the district where I came from, it was the city, could draw down, right? So the more kids participating, and then you do have some control on food vendors and the quality of food. So I think both. I think allowing us to spend some food, we can certainly come up with some guidelines for that. And then, I think we've heard some feedback that maybe if the quality was better, it would also benefit the school because, more kids would take the meals, and that would benefit us because they'd be more willing to use the program than leverage some dollars. But I think between connecting with there's other food people also that are not the school district, that also provide summer meals that we can connect with that we said. I'm totally okay, I think it's reasonable for food, for parent engagement, and where food's an integral part of the program, and for meals in the summer. So we can come back with a policy for that, to make that work for next year. This is the first year we wanted to see what worked. The feedback we got, it didn't work quite as well as we thought it would, so I think that's reasonable.
So did the school district supply the food?
I think it was for summer lunches, summer lunches,
There might have been a few sites where there was another food provider in there, right?
There was one, of the church who went through different programs.
Yeah.
Greater
Over the Great event.
Carly, team, y'all seem like y'all might have a stake in the quality of food. You know, if the school board is supplying, right?
So I think Ms. Eunice actually does an exceptional job, but I will talk to her about those menu items and find out perhaps we have some adjustments that we need to look at. I know one of the limitations is that if we don't have the location for cooking the food at the facility, that there is a level of transportation. But, I mean, I know just knowing, working with Ms. Eunice, that this is feedback that she'll want to hear and she'll address it. And
transportation of food is always a challenge.
Right,
If it's not a
especially in the
facility that
summer.
can have it, keep it hot, you know, heat it up, keep it hot, it becomes real problematic. And so then the menu matters, because if you consider things that don't need to be heated up, you're better off.
Dr. Hart?
So Christie, are we at general questions now? I don't mean to skip ahead, but I'm bursting with one too.
This was the last, slide in the presentation, and it is just an overall snapshot of really many of the things I've already discussed, so I am happy to take questions now.
Go ahead, Dr.
Okay, well, I just want to congratulate you for putting this together in such a way that we can assimilate it in a relatively short period of time, because this was a big investment, this was a big grand experiment on our part, and I think what I'm hearing from everybody is we're all in a spirit of quality improvement between finding out what Ms. Eunice can do with food that will satisfy children eating in places where they can't heat the food, to finding out why parents signed their kids up and then the kids never showed up. I'm always the one that wants to know about the people who weren't participating. I'm thrilled to know that 80 or 90% of the people who did participate liked it. That's excellent, and I don't think we can improve much on that. But I always want to know who wasn't there and why weren't they there. Because next year, when we want to see what we did better than we did this year, it's going to be hard to do better unless we figure out who those kids are that still fell in a gap and how we can serve them. And I know one of the questions we brought up early on was, what happens to families who want their children to participate but can't manage the transportation at that time of day? And that's what I was worried about when kids are saying things like, why did you make me get up so early? You know, mom goes to work at 7:30, camp starts at 8:30, I'm just sitting under a tree outside the building for an hour. You know, I don't know what those oddities are, but we might be able to explore it. And congratulations, anyway, Chrissy. You did a lot of work, and I'm sure it'll be better next year. And just listening to the critiques, we need to have thin skin and thick skin at the same time to really get the most out of it.
Jim?
Thanks for sharing. Christie, I want to kind of build on that. I think this is really a great analysis for our first year. I think we did the trust did a really nice job of getting the program put together, the money out there quickly. I remember us talking about, you know, one of our primary goals is to maintain reading level and not lose it over the summer. And I distinctly remember that meeting because we said, no, our goal is to just get people there. That could be a goal we work on. And I think in the spirit of kind of how we did this, this is a really good, great initial analysis. It gives us the opportunity to look at some of the organizations which obviously did better than others. You know, some got more children there, some got more children signed up but they didn't attend. And so it's really kind of a baseline of an initial program year, and I think that's great. Obviously, I'm interested in next year, as you bring back recommendations, increasing capacity increasing more attendance. I'm interested in improving that, if we're ready, that reading, retention, effectiveness, that literacy component. Improving transportation and food quality. I mean, gosh, thank you to the school board for providing food.
Yeah,
Let's
thank
just start
you so much.
with a big thank you to the school board, because I think that, but not for that, many of these programs couldn't feed our kids. And to Dr. Hart's point, now we kind of work on quality improvement going forward. So, again, I think it's really a great initial analysis. Has staff considered or thought about, the $400,000 that was not spent? That just, obviously, that just shows you the fund balance, but maybe that's some allocated dollars that we can look at for improving, capacity or some of these things moving into next year. And I'd be more than in favor.
We have, just to respond to, Mr. Cornell, we have, started that discussion as relates to our programs have the capacity to implement those types of programs. How do we monitor that? So we started that discussion as well as started the discussion about how we use those dollars. And I just want to echo what you said about the district. So within a week's time, they added 22 additional sites to what they were already doing. And so we are grateful for you offering that, because working with Ms. Eunice, and I think her name was Jen, they put that on and made it seem easy, but I'm sure it wasn't, including accommodating those children with peanut allergies. So thank you so much for what you did.
Bravo, thank you.
Well, I want to commend you, Christy, for an excellent presentation, and when I look at these numbers, I mean, this is a success story as far as I'm concerned, and I know reference was made at the last meeting about the 5 members causing some chaos and kind of rushing through this funding process. I think it's important to remember the context of these decisions, and that is that, $1.2 million came off the front for 3 other programs. That frankly felt very chaotic to me, if you will, initially. And so there was an effort to ensure some equalization, if you will, or some fairness to all of these providers providing this initiative and getting money out. And again, I know it may cause some issues or has caused some issues moving forward and some frustration on other providers' part who are trying to secure funding now. But when I look at, 22 programs, 1,200 children served, and that satisfaction rate of 98%, I mean, this I consider a success despite the, how rushed it was. And again, hats off to the staff for making it happen.
I just have one thing to say. I hear a lot in everything we're talking about, and since I happen to have the chair of the county commissioners sitting here at the table, I'm gonna say it. But transportation and access is like our continuous problem over and over and over again. It's an issue for the school district, it's an issue for every one of our families. And I would love for us, when we talk about pooling like all of the funding and, trying to orchestrate efforts, I really think like we've got to get a handle on transportation, because that is where it's literally the rubber meets the road on everything we're talking about. And so I just want to throw that out there.
So I started sitting on the Juvenile Justice Council 30 years ago. Rod Smith was chairing it, so that tells you how long ago it was. And transportation was the #1 issue then. Every year I served on that council, it has been the biggest challenge of getting kids to services, which is why I think sometimes if we can bring services to, and Christy, you highlighted one of the programs that made that happen by locating it, citing it, someplace that made that easier. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. If we could figure that out, either bringing it to the kids or the kids too, but we've got to sort that out. I too wanted to say this is fabulous data. Having the map of where all these programs were, I think, really communicates the breadth of what we've done. I found that really useful. I'm a sort of nitpicky data presenter, so just a couple of suggestions.
on each of your slides, just stick the total number of whatever it is that's represented. So those of us who like to say, 20% of something, that's just helpful. And then I did have just one question. There was no Hispanic Latinx category on the demographics, and I wondered about that. Hispanic or Latinx? Just a personal,
25% of our population?
10% of your board.
10% of our population.
I'm sorry, this is for the team over here, it was not collected. Is that the response? It was not collected.
It will be collected.
But it
We make those adjustments.
Thank you.
I had a question, Christie, on the graph. Is that, participation, the top one was participation by zip code, so it didn't matter which program it was, just where the family, like where they, identified as living? And then the participation by city, so we had a program, something in Waldo?
Yes, we have a program
Is this
involved.
where the kids were though, the city, the participation by city? Because I have to say, is that where the program was or where the city, or the
That
kids
is
were?
still the city where the child, resides. We did have a program in Waldo. You'll see that we have children in Newberry. We did not have a program in Newberry, but their families were able to enroll them in a different city. So that does not mean it's where the program was located, it is
Okay.
where the family resides.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
But this is just absolutely outstanding data. And the snapshots of each of the programs is just really helpful to see. So thank you so much. This is a lot of work. For those of us who've done this kind of stuff, this is not a small amount of work. I just want to say that.
Everybody has their option? Christie, I have a couple questions. One of the net weekly attendance, now when you said net weekly attendance, it gives a number, is that you compile all the children, that were enrolled, to see, what percentage of children were actually there for that particular time?
If you're looking at this same page that I have presented on this, I want to know what you're looking at.
I just took one random one, it was the boys and girls book.
So that's what you and I were talking about earlier. So it is based on, those children and the percentage of them that attended at least one day. And I'm gonna look at my evaluation person to make sure I'm answering that question correctly. Yeah.
So, okay, so for instance, if they could attend as little, if it was a 5-week program, they could only go like 5 days, and that would be, because that doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't, I know we don't control it, but that doesn't seem like the child is getting as much as they could get. So that seems like it's kind of how do we address that? Because, and certainly that's not, and I'll reiterate, this is fantastic. But, giving us this information, I think that's kind of an issue. Because if we're gonna be paying for something, because they have to have all the supplies, assuming that the child is gonna be there the entire time. You want to jump in?
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So if you look at like Cade Museum, they serve 34 kids, they're projected to serve 60, but it says their weekly attendance was 89%, right? So is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Right, and so we chose to measure what we paid them on, and we paid them on 1 day a week intentionally because of COVID and capacity. We didn't want people to have staff to pay for, and then have kids have to leave because of infections and things. So we were generous as possible. And so when we measured what it meant to attend, we used the 1 day a week. Now, we could just have some additional measures, and we could tell you what the attendance rate was per child. It's just, we have the data, we could just run it different ways and tell you.
Well, it's not the data so much as it is, okay, is that the most effective use of the funds? Because if the child was only there 1 day a week, they staffed up, they got the supplies, we paid them, and so the 4 days.
In the long term, no, it's not, but I think for this year, given the context, it was.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, this year, I just want to understand it, I'm presenting that, in my mind, that's an issue.
Good point.
And I think, whatever we need to do to overcome that, it's for the child, and if they're only there 20% of the time, they don't get a whole lot. Dr. Archer, before I continue.
So this is a perfect example of what staff could perhaps focus group on, get those families and find out why the child only came. Because there's probably a really good reason that we may need to address, such as transportation, so.
And when I've asked that question before, because we used to reach out to no-shows, and one of the questions we asked was, is there anything we could have done that would have made it possible for, as opposed to why didn't you show up?
Right.
The companion to that is there anything we could have offered or done to help make that happen?
Am I reading it correctly? Is there one that has a fairly amount of dissatisfaction and a very low participation rate?
Sorry.
Yes, well, there's one we assume had not.
Okay, so that's a good part for a focus group, because, you know, if you were dissatisfied, is that why your attendance was low, or, you know, what would that be? Okay, just want to make sure.
Chrissy, the other, you know, because performance measures, in my opinion, are very, very important. It looks like this year with, you know, who got programs and what the parents happy with the program, which is fine. You know, just kids have fun. You know, that's important. But kind of reiterating what Ken said, you know, if one of the things that's important to us, and it is to me, we want to make sure that there's an academic component to these programs as well, so that or something that they can do to use their minds, you know. But we, as an organization, have to have questions to ask the organization to see whether or not they achieve what they said they were going to do. So as we go forward, I think that's also important. And what's here is perfect. You know, they had a good time. And, you know, they didn't want to leave. They didn't want to get up early. And the parents were extremely happy. So, you know, kudos to y'all for what you did in a very short period of time. But going forward, when we have more time, I think the questions to ask organizations to see whether or not they're doing what they said they're going to do, you know, that's important. You know, when it comes up again, you know, we can tell people when when this goes out, whenever that will be. Here are the questions that we asked, and you know, they did what they said they were going to do. We held their feet to the fire.
My only comment on that is to be careful not, I mean, I agree, we don't want kids to lose ground during the summer, and that's always one of the high-risk situations, but there are other kinds of things that programs could be seeking to do other than just retain literacy or retain scores. For some of these children, having a meaningful activity during the summer, especially as I'm thinking about older kids, is equally important. We want to keep them occupied in pro-social behaviors and activities, and that can be just as important as not losing, you know, points on a reading scale or math. I don't play that down at all, but I think for our older kids in particular, thinking about vocation, thinking about meaningful work, thinking about social engagement and civic engagement are just as important.
And that's a valid point, and it's up to us to determine. Obviously, we want our children to be able to read early so they don't get behind, whereas later on, and not every child goes to college. And we know that 60% of the children don't go to college. So if there's something that we can invest in, you know, for the benefit of their future, then that's
The question to the program would be, what are you aiming to impact with this program?
So, Christy, thank you very much for allowing me to.
One more, just David, and commending y'all for collecting it, and I think it's really commendable. When I looked across the profiles to see the percentages of children who participated in the camps who had individualized education programs.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to applaud you all for helping to support inclusion rather than segregation in summer camps. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you, Christy. On to the next one.
On to the next one, and so, the continuation of the presentation will be provided by finance.
Any questions from anybody?
I don't know this something.
Okay. Thank you, Christy.
Okay, it's my job. For an hour, I'm like,
Good afternoon.
Good evening, my name is Bonnie Wagner, I'm the new Research Planning and Evaluation Coordinator, and I'm here to present our evaluation criteria for continuation of funding for promising programs. And we're seeking, your approval, board approval, to distribute unallocated funds to worthy programs who are making an impact on Alachua County youth. We wanted to have a fair and systematic process for all programs from fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 who are not currently funded. We wanted to select the very best programs who have been responsive and accountable with the dollars spent, and we wanted to provide services that are aligned with our unfunded strategies. So placed at your seat, you should all have these. We did make a couple of small revisions. We more inclusive of the 2020 program, which their end-of-year reports look slightly different than the ones for 2021. So we wanted to make a couple of minor revisions on that. And I'm going to run through what the criteria is and then our timeline and questions. So the first stage is pre-qualification, where we would look at to see if a program had never invoiced and during their last active year. We would look at their funding status for 2022, this current year. If they're already funded, they wouldn't be eligible for this opportunity. So we also look to see, then we'd look at their end-of-year report. We'd look at their completeness, whether they submitted the report that contained all the information requested in it. We look at their narrative that they included in their end-of-year report and the efforts they put forward, whether it was detailed enough to convey the program's efforts during the fiscal year, the individuals served, and then also their ability to demonstrate the program's benefits, ability to connect with and meet the needs of underserved cultural groups, and the promise to positively impact children to continue funding. We look to see whether the report was submitted on time, and then we rate the alignment with their current scope of work and whether it aligns with one of CPAC's strategies, and particularly those unfunded strategies that are unfunded for 22. So from that point, we would rate all the programs. I think there's, from the pre-qualifications, there's about 32 programs that qualify that are not being funded and that did invoice during their last active year. And then all those would move into stage 1, where we would score them based on their end-of-year report. Those that score 15 or above, they would then continue into stage 2, where we would invite them to come back and do a budget and include their performance measures. And then we would then rate that, and the timeline is on that last page, so it's a very tight timeline. And so we received the end-of-year reports for due on October 5th. Between October 6th and the 14th, we'll be reviewing the end-of-year assessment according to the criteria that was put forth. And then on the 15th, so this Friday, we would notify the provider of the results, the ones that score 15 and above. And then they would have the opportunity to respond their interest and submit their proposals, and then review those and present those recommendations to the board. Because of the tight timeline, we wouldn't be able to present the results in advance of the meeting. We would walk in with the information on that day or maybe slightly before. Does anyone have any questions?
I can.
Fine, thank you for the presentation. So did you say there were 32 entities?
There's 32 programs that meet this qualification out of the 45 of the original funding.
Okay, so there were originally 45, and so there's 13 that didn't meet the program. Are any of those 13 because they didn't get their report in by October 5th?
No, that's one of the criteria for stage 1, so even if they get late, they'll lose 5 points, but they'll still get evaluated, and if they're really, if they get 5 points in each of the other 3 categories, they could still go on to stage 2.
Okay, but as of right now, which is October 11th, you've gotten 32 of them already in, so you're scoring.
We did not receive a report from all the programs, no, and that's part of the criteria, some programs did not submit their end of year reports as of the CDC. About 40% did not submit a report.
40%. Okay, so, so are we calling you so you get your report?
Yes, we have been,
I'm trying to prevent, I got my report in a day late and I got things, but, you know, so we are good.
Yes, they have been, they've reached out to them on multiple occasions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions?
So, one of the questions that I had when I looked at some of those attendance numbers, in addition to COVID, was wondering whether partly they had overestimated the likely attendance. Did we set that target, or did they?
The 85.
Most of them, I think, had a proposed 85% attendance.
We talking about this number?
Yes, just as an example, I know, this is different.
But what I'm saying is,
I know how people, yes, we did.
yeah.
We set that goal.
So I think we need to ask ourselves when we set some of these kind of minimal thresholds, whether they're realistic for the type of program. So if I'm working with a set of kids that are highly motivated, want to achieve, want to get some places, 85 may be a low attendance target. If I'm working with some of the judges' children, 85 may be like really wishful thinking. And I get it, you were only doing 1 day a week. I just want to caution us when we set these targets and when people submit applications, that there's a huge temptation when you're writing a grant or an RFP to overestimate what you're actually going to be able to do with the population being served. So I just want to make sure that as we review these, part of what we discussed with these applicants is that really a realistic number, and how are we setting that target? And then if I'm understanding, this is allocating the 383,000 and some odd. It does not include any of the unspent summer, which remains available to allocate to other things. Is that correct?
The unspent summer is last year, so if you wanted to pull in money and increase, you'd be increasing the budget.
Right.
So that would, we can do that, that would require a whole different process of public hearing, and we can do that. The other thing is, we put in the budget, there was some money for match, we're going through after-school contract negotiations, if there's any money left from that. We may come back with a recommendation and say, here, there's some extra money available, so we can fund more than what's on here.
Okay. That was really just for me to make sure I understood what you were.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Steve?
So the applications that you're reviewing now, this was opened up like a month or so ago. Am I recalling that correctly? Like, agencies could apply, to be considered as part of this process?
So these, applicants that we are considering
Yes.
are those that, submitted end of the year reports for 2020 and 2021. So there's nothing they needed to do. They were pulled into a process for us to consider. They will, however, after we go through the first stage, be informed
What's your
that
proposal?
we want to have them submit some additional information. But they've already submitted what we needed, and that was their end of the year report.
Kim?
I would move approval of criteria for continued funding, that's my motion, and to Maggie's point, to the extent, you say in here, we could fund maybe 5, we may be able to fund more. I'm really interested in seeing what comes back. And, I would ask the staff, that's our budgeted amount, but if we've got really good proposals or other things that we haven't seen yet, I want us to be flexible and kind of move on the fly on that November meeting. So, that's it.
So,
I just moved that to recommendation.
and with funding to be determined.
Well, right now, it's budgeted for 383.
But to be determined. It can fluctuate.
Yeah, and it could go up, but that was required, Tom said, a budget amendment, and a majority of us would say let's increase the unallocated amount.
Okay. So we have a motion, do we bring a presentation. It says if the board wishes to make changes to the funding process. Are you talking about this?
Yeah, if you guys wanted to say, add a fifth criteria to stage one, and then we have to go through and read all the reports
Okay,
again.
but the
based on
motion
that,
is
then
just leave it as it is, so,
We
okay.
need another month to do
Okay.
that.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Motion? Dr. Hart?
Okay, I have a question, because this specifically is called criteria for continuation funding, but I think, our esteemed brother Cornell is suggesting that there may be people who are not funded at this moment who might.
No,
have been-
I'm not.
You're not, okay.
No, there's 42 organizations that are eligible for this.
Yeah, the ones that were funded in 2020 or 2020.
Now, their programming may be completely different, but that's handled in phase two. But those organizations have been vetted essentially, right? And they're saying, I want a continuation.
So it's anybody who's received our funding from GO.
2020, yeah.
That's my question.
That's the first question, never invoiced.
Any questions from the public? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's unanimous. Okay,
Really good job.
good job, Mike. We're an intimidating bunch, I'm sure it's hard to make.
Yeah, you are.
Program calendar?
Yes, so, as indicated last month, I will provide you all with the updated program calendar for your review. I don't get to present it, this month, but, it is there for your review. If you have any questions, I can answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Okay. All right.
Actually, I need to find it. Where is it? Oh, I see it, I'm sorry. I see it. I know.
Timeline?
22, have this right here.
Okay, board member comments? Anybody have anything they would like to bring to the board? Okay, general member, general public, any questions or comments?
Pointing at you.
I'm online from Michael Rayburn, who is representing Gainesville Junior and Gainesville Grade Literacy Program. He would like to ask for funding for their literacy program. I don't see him online, so maybe speak himself. I do have Lydia Gallione, in the audience, to speak about the Gainesville Grade Literacy Program.
Okay.
Sorry, I guess Michael comes off, but, well, first, I just want to thank Christie and just like Judge Bullard said, thank you so much for, the great input and all the great discussion that we had. The thing that I would just like to point out to the board, as I do almost every meeting, is that, what Christie did with the quick RFA and the quick funding, we see that works and it has phenomenal results. And so I'd just like to continue to encourage you to take needs that are current and programs that are meeting needs of children and continue to fund those throughout the year in a expedited manner that doesn't have to wait for long RFAs and, just hoops to jump through. I think we have a great case study right here that, you did something, you funded it, and look at the success that they had. So,
Well, I think we're working on, hopefully, we'll get to the point where it's a 3-year commitment. So, that would make things even better. Ashley, on the other person that sent in the set of organizations that's been funded previously,
yes, that's our organization. We haven't done it previously, so we would hesitate.
Wait, on that point, on our agenda, it would be great, we started doing this at the county to move board comments to after general public comments. If anything comes up, then we have an opportunity to speak about it.
yeah, that's good. I see you writing with your red pen, so I know it'll be different. Okay, and there were some informational items, as you see, and our next meeting will be November 8th, and it will be here. until after the first of the year sometime. So with that, thank you all very much. I hope you have a great week when we see each other next time, and this meeting is adjourned.